IVF Real Talk.
I'm Lucy.
And I'm Yaelle. Welcome back, guys. Today we have lovely Dr. Tamara joining the pod.
Welcome.
Thank you, girls, so much for having me. Great to be here.
We're very excited. Today we're talking all things genetic with Dr. Tamara Hunter, who is a fertility specialist with Monash IVF, and she's going to talk us through it all.
And I'm excited for this episode because I don't know about you, I get very overwhelmed about this topic. I don't know, I can't get my head around it. It's very confusing.
Can't get my head around it
I feel like,
and we did the testing.
So the listeners are going to be confused as well. So I feel like this is going to be a good episode, and I feel like you're the perfect person to break this down for us.
Oh, I hope so. I hope I can put it in simple terms.
Had you on our wish list to come on the pod as well. So we're 2 years in, and we're so happy that you're joining us today.
Oh, great.
To discuss such an important topic. But before we do, we need to do our segment. So you're a doctor,
Really
so you have to be put through.
segment.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So we've got 3 fun facts we've asked chat for. So are you ready for the first one?
Oh, yes, I guess.
You don't have a choice. We're going to do it anyway.
Okay.
The first one is Dr. Tamara's career has taken her from exercise science to fertility medicine, proving it's never too late for a career pivot. Is this true?
This is absolutely true. Do you know, it actually took me 8 years to get accepted into medical school. I went back and I went back and I went, like, I am the classic case of never give up. And eventually at the grand old age of 25, they finally got sick of interviewing me and said, okay, come on in.
Good on you.
And so I started medical school. I thought I was really old at 25 going into medical school.
Did you always want to get into medical school? Was that always your dream from the start?
I did. I loved biology and human biology. I even loved biochemistry. I loved learning about how the body worked. As an exercise physiologist, one of the greatest things I loved was teaching people how to prevent disease. So it was all about, staying fit, healthy, not gaining too much weight, sleeping, eating well, all those sorts of things. And then to go, well, I know how to prevent disease. How can I now treat it? And so that's where I went, I've got to get into medical school. And so I just kept trying.
Wow, that's really inspiring. And that's so cool. Does that mean that, like, if our girls are doing really well in, like, science and chemistry at school, that we could have doctors in the making as well?
Yeah, but, kids, they change their minds so many times these days. That's true. Mine certainly do.
Well, Olivia tells me I'm going to be a doctor, Mum.
Do the passion.
Oh, did she say that? That's
all
really
the time.
sweet.
So I'm like, is this
That's
gonna
really sweet.
But like you said, they change their mind.
Who
all the
knows?
time,
In 20 years' time, there might be no doctors and it's all AI. Who knows?
Oh, don't say that.
Oh, no. We definitely need the human input into medicine.
Absolutely,
and
we
healthcare. We will never do without humans.
Yeah,
I agree.
Surely.
I agree.
Yeah, unless Terminator hits and then we're all out. Okay, so the next ChatGPT fun fact is Dr. Tamara became WA's first female certified specialist in reproductive endocrinology and fertility.
Yes, that is also true. So when you do obstetrics and gynecology, it's a 6-year training course. So obviously after the 6 years of medicine, and then you do a little bit of running around the hospitals as a little medical officer, you can then try to get onto training programs. So the one that I got onto was obstetrics and gynecology. I was always that junior doctor who ran around the hospital saying, let me do the speculum examinations so the boys don't have to do them. So I was that girl. And then I got onto O&G pretty quickly, loved it, thought I was going to deliver all of the babies in Perth. I was going to deliver all the celebrities. I was going to be, the celebrities obstetrician. And then just got over getting up at 3 a.m. in the morning and just being tired all of the time. I had a little bit of burnout halfway through my training and literally stumbled into this world of fertility and went, oh my God, there's this whole new world. I get to work in laboratories. I get to work with men again. It was eye-opening. And then I realized, I felt that I just didn't have the knowledge base to be able to adequately treat patients and know that I was giving them the best possible care. And so there's this extra bit of training that you can do after you've done your O&G training called CREI, or Certificate of Reproductive Endocrinology and Infertility. So I thought, just, because I'm a glutton for punishment, I'll do this extra training as well. So it's an extra 3 years because I threw a couple of kids in there. It actually took me somewhere between 5 and 7 years. But it did arm me with, I feel, a really good knowledge base in the REI space so that I know when I sit in front of patients, I am giving the most current care, I'm giving the most up-to-date care. And it really, having trainees that you work with and going to these conferences and working alongside other REIs in this industry, it keeps you really honest. And so you have to constantly keep yourself at the horizon level of information. And so I really like the fact that I put myself through that extra bit of training. It was so difficult doing it with a family and doing the juggle. But I really feel that it's just given me that extra piece of information that I can use to help patients.
I really commend you on that because 6 years of medical school is a long time. And to put yourself another 3 ended up being, 5. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's dedication, though. Obviously, you have a lot of passion for your job to do that.
Yeah, I do.
And we've learnt along the way that not all of the specialists have the CRE.
Yeah, because it's not, it's
So
optional, so you don't need to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are lots of levels of extra training you can do. People go ahead and do PhDs. People do unaccredited fellowships, so they might not get the REI, but they might still work alongside an REI for a couple of years. So I think it is really important for patients, and this is, my tip number 1, do your homework on the fertility doctor that you're going to see. See what extra training they've done. Maybe they've published research. Maybe they regularly go to conferences, but by looking at what they do outside of what they do in front of you, I think is also really important.
Yeah. I mean, look at Tamara. She's on the news. She's in the media. She's in articles. She's everywhere. She's a celebrity doctor, this one.
And check out her Instagram. I love it.
And the last one is she's helped establish fertility preservation programs for young cancer patients, allowing children and adolescents facing cancer treatment to preserve future fertility options.
Yeah. So before I die, this will be my legacy. We know how much cancer treatments can impact on the future fertility of young women and men. And it's often in those overwhelming moments for families with their young children that they don't get the opportunity to really stop and think about this. All they care about is that their child is going to survive. But it does have long-term effects. So we know that the education piece is really important for families before their children go through treatment for cancer. But we also know that the possible options to preserve not only gives them future fertility hopes, but it also gives them a sense of hope that my kid's going to get through this. So before I die, I want to make sure that we have a well-established onco-fertility program here in WA that rivals what they have in Melbourne and Sydney and Queensland. I want to know that we can preserve the ovarian tissue of young girls here in WA. This is still such exploratory, experimental that is really sort of championed by the doctors in Melbourne. I want to know that we can create something as special over here on the West Coast because we are a long distance away, and for West Australian families to need to rely on the services in Melbourne, it would be nice to be able to create something here. So that's my legacy piece, girls, before I die. And I think the other thing that's really driven me more recently to that is I'm a cancer survivor myself. I had breast cancer in 2023. And so having that lived experience and being on the other side of the coin, it has really driven the way that I fashion that patient journey.
Wow, you're amazing.
Yeah, you are.
And I can see you have a lot of...
just a woman, girls. I'm just
you're
a
going to
woman.
make me cry.
I know. No, I can see you're really passionate about that. And obviously, you have lived experience with that as well. And I think you're helping other people go through that when maybe they don't have any hope, and you're helping them look to the future. So I think that's truly incredible.
Thanks, girls.
And ChatGPT got them all right.
Yes. 3 out of 3. There you go.
Thank you,
What did we miss?
ChatGPT.
What did we miss? No, we could do the whole episode here.
We can just have a chat with Tamara. Forget the questions.
Yeah.
So maybe we should start off with the very first thing. What exactly is genetic testing in fertility, and how can it help patients reduce time, emotional stress, and the risk of miscarriage? Sorry, it's a loaded question to start off.
Yeah. So I think something that you said before really resonated with me, and that is that it's a really hard area to understand. And that's because we're dealing with something that we can't see. in every single one of our cells, we have this genetic blueprint that makes us who we are. And we've always learned that every single cell in the human body is exactly the same and has exactly the same blueprint. It kind of blows your mind to think that, well, maybe that's not actually the case, that maybe some of our cells that make up the majority of us have, for example, 46 XX chromosomes, which is what a female is, but maybe there's some areas that might have 46 XO. So that's the very basics of genetics, is that we've got this blueprint in our cells and it makes us who we are and how we function on a day-to-day basis. When we're talking about genetic testing, what we're actually talking about is two concepts. The first area of genetic testing is the testing of the male and the female couple. Now, obviously, there's not always male and female couples, but let's talk about the egg participant and the sperm participant. So when we are looking at reproduction between a male and a female, we're looking at how their genetics mesh together to create another individual. So there's genetic testing of the individuals with the hope that we're not going to find dangerous disease mutations that they're matched on that could result in a future child being born with a significant disease that either shortens their life or leads them to a life of significant disease burden. So that's one aspect of genetic testing the parents. Then the other part of genetic testing that we can offer in the IVF space is genetic testing of embryos to look for one of three different distinct things. The first thing is evidence of a genetic disease. The second thing is evidence that there is an abnormal chromosome number. So a classic example that we all talk about is Down syndrome. So we know in Down syndrome, that's 3 copies of chromosome 21 or trisomy 21. So that's having too many of chromosome 21, therefore what we call aneuploidy. That's just the Latin term to say abnormal number of chromosomes. So that's one other area. The third area, which we don't talk about so much, is when the parents' chromosomes are a bit abnormal. So they've got all their genetic material, it's all there, and they are normal individuals, but their chromosomes are kind of crossed over in funny ways, such that when they donate half, because a sperm has half the chromosomes and the egg has the other half, when they donate together, all the chromosomes are a bit mixed up, and then they have a structural rearrangement that causes abnormal chromosome numbers. So that's called an unbalanced picture. So the first type, a mutation, is like the example most people commonly understand is cystic fibrosis. So I'm not sure if you know, but 1 in 25 Caucasians carries the CF gene mutation. So you can imagine if 2 people both carried the cystic fibrosis gene mutation and they got together and they had a child born with 2 copies, that child would have cystic fibrosis. And there's a 1 in 4 chance that that can happen. So that's what we call preimplantation genetic testing for a monogenic disorder, or PGTM. When we're looking for chromosome copy number issues, so like trisomy 21, we call that PGTA. So preimplantation genetic testing for aneuploidy, abnormal chromosome number. And we'll often do that in older women because they have a higher likelihood of embryos that have abnormal chromosome numbers. And we can talk about that a bit more. And then the third type of testing is PGT-SR, looking at structural rearrangement. So we're looking for this unbalanced picture in an embryo because that can lead to a higher rate of miscarriage or a high rate of infertility. So when we talk about helping patients manage emotional stress, it might be the emotional stress of recurrent miscarriage or the emotional stress of, oh my goodness, there's a 1 in 4 chance that I could have a child with cystic fibrosis. Or it could be, I carry this translocation, this structural rearrangement. And so I don't want to have a long time trying to get pregnant. I want to make sure I have an embryo that doesn't have this unbalanced picture. So there's the two testings, the testing of the parents, then there's the testing of the embryos, and within the testing of the embryos, there's those three different types of PGT. Does that kind of break it down?
Yeah, makes sense.
Think is understandable?
We did the couple carrier, which is the parents testing. So we did that prior. And then, and I had a friend actually who had the translocation.
Is it the balanced translocation? Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
Is that quite rare?
Some 3 to 7% of people will carry the balanced form of a translocation. There's lots of different types of translocations, but particularly in a recurrent miscarriage population, if you're seeing someone having lots of miscarriages, you always think to yourself, could this be a balanced translocation?
Okay.
Wow.
I remember doing that test. Just that one blood test. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the one
Does that sound like it would have been just a one blood test?
So often what we look at is a parental carrier type. So that's when I'm saying, oh, you have 46XX and your husband or the sperm donor has 46XY, as opposed to, oh, you have a translocation between chromosome 8 and chromosome 20, meaning 8 and 20 have been crossed over. And so when you split them, they split in an unbalanced way. Okay.
Has genetic testing always been a part of IVF? I'm assuming it wouldn't have been at the very start, but has it been around for like 20 so years or just in the last decade?
Yeah, look, yes, 20 years, absolutely. Okay. So there has been this evolution, right? So back in the early days, we did something called FISH, F-I-S-H, and that is where you would test something like 9 chromosomes. You would they would put little probes on the carrier type, and then they would look under their microscope at the different colors, and they would say, oh yeah, there's 2 copies of chromosome 9, there's 2 copies of chromosome 21. There's 3 copies of chromosome 14. That's a trisomy 14. So it was that gross. From there, we've moved, since we've been able to, I guess, replicate the human genome back at the sort of in the early 2000s. Since then, there has been this exponential explosion in the development of genomics and genetics, where we now can do complete hybridization. So we can look at somebody's entire genome and their all of the chromosomes to next-gen sequencing, to something called karyomapping, which is how we do most of the genetic testing, where we can literally track the genetic heritance of a gene mutation through families. And, we can now say, that embryo has trisomy 21, 3 copies of chromosome 21, and the extra one came from the egg, or the extra one came from the sperm. So I
did not know that was a thing.
Yeah. So it depends on the sort of platform that a particular clinic is using to do their genetic testing. But, we can now provide that kind of detail for couples.
So does that mean patients doing egg freezing, their eggs can be tested for it as well, not just embryos? Or we're not that far yet with science?
No, everybody asks me that. Can I get my eggs tested? Yes, in research, they do what's called polar body testing. So they look at the little polar body that's extruded in a mature egg, and they test the chromosomes of that as a reflection of what's happening in the egg itself. But in clinical practice, that's not done. And the main reason for that is about a third of mutations actually happen after the zygotic stage, so after the egg and sperm have come together and they've had the first replication.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's why you're much better to test embryos than you are to test eggs or sperm.
Yeah. And that's what I thought. Like, I thought when we did our, even doing the couple carrier versus testing embryos has a level of things that can't be tested for till it's an embryo, correct?
Yeah.
Like
and I think
Down syndrome you can't test for as a like genetic couple carrier testing.
No,
is that right?
Because that's that's a chromosome copy number issue, not a gene mutation issue. And I just want to talk to the carrier screening thing, because I think this is really important. We're still trying to get good penetrance of education on this. So I still get patients coming to me having been trying to conceive for years and they'd never heard of carrier screening before. What if they had fallen pregnant and, oh my goodness, you're both carriers of cystic fibrosis. Now we've got this pregnancy that we need to test for. And then they get to 16 weeks. Oh, by the way, this pregnancy has cystic fibrosis, and they have to make a really hard decision. I would encourage GPs to be having this carrier screening from the get-go, from the moment that woman walks in and says, hey, I want to do preconception screening to make sure I'm healthy for pregnancy. Okay, let's talk about carrier screening right now. And there are levels of carrier screening. So in Australia right now, you can do 3 gene screening. Thank you, federal government, for funding that for women. That screens for CF, spinal muscular atrophy, and Fragile X, which is an intellectual disability in boys. But in fact, 80% of shared mutations are outside the 3 gene screening. So perhaps we actually should be educating more on the expanded carrier screening. And I think that's what maybe you were alluding to is, there are panels that contain 500 genes and 1,000 genes and 1,500 genes. Like, where do you stop with this stuff? So I think the education piece we have to get better at, so people understand this is all about risk mitigation and how far you want to go as a couple or an individual with how much screening you want.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, and it's like you said, I think the education piece is so important, because we did it at the start of our journey when we did our pre-screening and we got recommended, which was amazing. But yeah, it was just a whirlwind of like, what is couple carrier? We had no idea what we were doing, but we got a really big panel of, I think, 700 diseases tested, so it was good, but I didn't understand it. So yeah, this episode's good.
And look, you're getting tested for rare and terrible diseases where a child might die within months of them being born. So they're pretty bad diseases, but the likelihood of you being a carrier is maybe 1 in 100,000. The thing is, if it's you, it's major, because that's for the lifespan of your child. And if you can mitigate the risk of burden on that child, burden on you as a family, and also burden on the public healthcare system, I think it's worth it.
Yeah.
Just to know, and then you make an informed decision.
I like the way you put that, because I think a lot of people are also scared to do it because we're scared to get results back. But the way you put that, it just made me feel reassured. I don't know.
But also,
you can prevent it.
We got results, and this was also a new thing that we learnt, is it wasn't only us being like whether we were couple carriers or not. It actually turned out that my husband had a disease that his parents were couple carriers, and obviously back then was never tested. So it was passed down to him, and thankfully at the time he was 40, and the endocrinologist he saw basically said, look, you don't have any symptoms. You've lived your whole life not knowing, but it is good to know if you ever in any sort of trauma in hospital, they actually need to know you have it.
What's it called again? Something
it was,
X.
Yeah, it was non-classic.
That's right.
Oh, I can't remember it now.
Non-classic, I remember that.
There was a classic version and a non-classic. And the classic version would have meant he probably wouldn't have survived. Wow. But he had the non-classic version of this disease, and it came with all these random symptoms.
It's like congenital adrenal hyperplasia or something like that.
That's it. That's it. That's
the only one that I know. Non-classical versus classical.
I love it. Yes, that's it. So that's what he has, and he has it now. And then, of course, we had the chance that there was a 1 in 4 of Olivia,
which is a massive stat.
And it's a big deal for a female baby, because it can lead to ambiguous genitalia. But for a male baby, it's not really a big deal. So then it's impactful on the counselling for you and how you feel about, well, do we want to go through IVF, which we may or may not need, in order to then have a child that's unaffected by that? So there are all the important counselling things that have to take place around these results for people to understand it and then make informed decisions.
Yeah, so we were blessed by it after. Shocked at first, but like my husband now says, at least I know, like, what if something happens and I'm in hospital and they can't treat it because they need to know. So, on that, who should consider genetic testing, and are there situations where families can have life-changing experiences from doing it?
Yeah. I think you have alluded to the perfect example of a life-changing experience by finding out something that you didn't know and may never have manifested itself as a problem for you, to be able to ensure that your future child's health is as best as it possibly can be, is life-changing.
Yeah.
So I think anyone who is looking at I think anyone should do carrier screening in a relationship, and it's for the life of that relationship. If the relationship breaks up and there's a new relationship, you have to do it all again. But it's for the life of the relationship. And I think the question to ask is, how much do we want to mitigate risk in our families? And so I think everybody should do carrier screening if they can afford it. I think at the very least, the federal government funds 3Gene, at least do the 3Gene.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. When we're talking about genetic testing of embryos, I think part of this is state-by-state legislation is different. And so in some states, not everybody can access PGT for aneuploidy until a certain age or a certain status. But I think anybody who is entitled to do PGT aneuploidy, there should definitely be a discussion around it with your fertility specialist, because I do think that in certain populations, in certain patients, doing PGT-A is going to reduce the time to an ongoing pregnancy. It's going to reduce the emotional burden of potential miscarriage or late miscarriage, or having to make horrible decisions about pregnancy termination around children with terrible syndromes. So I think everyone should have the opportunity to discuss, are we entitled to PGT? Is it worth it in our situation? Is it going to help me achieve a pregnancy in the least burdensome way possible for me and my family?
What's the difference between genetic testing and general screening, and why does it matter?
Yeah. So every fertility centre has different things that they mandate as part of testing. Mostly it's around what's possibly causing infertility. So things like tubal patency. Are you having a cycle? Is your uterus normal? Is the sperm normal? They're kind of the mandatory tests for why you may or may not be falling pregnant. Then there is the screening things that might affect a pregnancy outcome. So what's your thyroid function like? Is your risk of diabetes an issue? Do you have infectious diseases that can cause issues in pregnancy or may inhibit where your embryos, eggs or sperm go in a lab? So mandatory testing about infectious diseases. That's kind of the general screening. And different clinics have different appetites for how much or how little they screen. Genetic testing is, I believe, that extra step. The extra step you go to. So, for example, a karyotype is not mandated in every fertility centre. I do it in my centre because I believe I want the couple to know from the get-go that there might be a risk of a translocation, because it's pretty awful getting halfway through IVF cycle, transferring embryos not sticking, them not getting pregnant, and all of a sudden I've just found out that you've got a translocation that I could have tested for much earlier and therefore tested your embryos. So in my practice, I do routine karyotypes on all of my patients from the get-go. but genetic testing per se, as I said, there's the two types. I think that all patients should really be offered that couple screening, carrier screening as part of general screening. I think even at the GP level, patients should really come to the fertility specialist with that already being done.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
But I do think that's how I would differentiate between general screening and genetic screening. Is that kind of answering the question?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's, and like you said, you don't want to be halfway through your journey to find something that could have just been tested for at the beginning.
And you probably see that a lot.
Yeah.
Patients coming to you, maybe halfway through their journey, and then maybe in your mind you're thinking, oh, maybe it's this, I just need to get that test done.
Yeah.
But how would you explain that to a patient? Oh, it's just this. You should have probably been tested. But I guess maybe some clinics don't do it, or some doctors maybe don't see it something to get as important as you do at the start, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's whenever you're doing screening, you've got to think about a screening tool. Is it costly? Is it not costly? Of course, we've got to consider the Medicare dollar in all of this as well. Can I treat the outcomes of this? Is it going to be a timely wait? So for a while there, it was taking us months to get carrier type results.
Oh, wow.
So am I going to make a patient couple wait for 3 months before I do an IVF cycle while I'm waiting for their carrier type to come back? So all of that needs to be taken into consideration when you do these screening tests as well. But it is a slightly challenging conversation when you do find something you think, oh God, in my clinic, that's, you can't do the one-upmanship, because everybody has their very valid reasons as to why they will not do a screening test.
Yeah. And by the sounds of it, from my friend, it can go missed for a while.
Yeah, you can put endometriosis in that category as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was about to say, it's like the unexplained that then is explained later on.
But is explained. It's just how far do you go down that rabbit hole before you actually start the treatment process?
Like you said, it's all invisible.
Yeah.
Bloody infertility. So frustrating.
Put the whole thing in that basket, right?
Yeah. Part of the journey.
Yeah. That's right. I love it. Okay. So, Tamara, how do you guide patients when results are unclear or ambiguous?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's such a challenging question.
It's a big
No,
one.
that's okay. I could kind of go lots of different directions, but I'll use the example of mosaicism. So mosaicism is when, and again, this is this conceptual thing, it's hard to imagine, but in a cell, you've got the blueprint. And let's talk about a female blueprint would be 46XX, so 2 copies of the X chromosome. Imagine an embryo that has and it's an embryo that's got 100 cells in it. Imagine that half of those cells are 46XX, and then somewhere along the division pathway, there was a bit of a mix-up, and then this cell line that kept dividing, was 46XO. So it's missing an X chromosome. That's actually called Turner's syndrome. So imagine a 100-cell embryo where 50% of it is 46XX, normal female, and 46XO, which is Turner's. Now, a Turner's is consistent with life. There's lots of women walking around out there with Turner syndrome, and they are perfectly normal, functional human beings in society. But there are some issues that they have. So they have issues with premature ovarian failure. They have issues with endocrine issues like thyroid dysfunction. They are often quite short. They have challenges around their cardiac function. So they have some challenges in life. But imagine that embryo continuing to divide down that pathway where 50% of it is normal female and 50% of it is Turner syndrome. Imagine an embryo being tested for that and being found to have mosaic Turners. It is neither normal, female, nor is it abnormal, female. And imagine mosaicism of lots of different combinations and permutations. This becomes quite challenging to counsel patients on, because there are some forms of mosaic embryos that are going to be consistent with a normal functional human being. And then there are some forms of mosaicism where it's going to be a fatal disease. And there are some forms of mosaicism where that abnormal cell line will just die out and the normal cell line will continue through and the abnormal cell line will die out. So it's really, now mosaicism has always been there. We just haven't been able to measure it until our genetic testing caught up, the technology caught up. So all of a sudden, where we were calling embryos normal and abnormal, now we're also identifying mosaic embryos, and they're neither normal nor are they abnormal. It's not that we've got this new thing called mosaicism. It's always been there. It's just previously they were called normal or previously they were called abnormal. Now we term them mosaicism. So that to me is the greatest example of how do you explain this to patients that it's actually always been there. It's just our technology has become so good that we can now identify it and now that I can counsel you on it. And there's several other examples of just advancing technologies and us trying to keep up with the identification of things that we just couldn't identify before. And we used to just put it in black or white. Now there are all these varying shades of grey. So that's just the easiest example, but I'm sure there are lots. And that's why it's really important that with any service that offers genetic testing, you also have counsellors that can be present to very quickly be available to patients. And if not counsellors, then geneticists on staff who can then interpret results. If the humble fertility specialist who has done this as part of their training but is not completely trained in this space finds it difficult to interpret results, we've got access to genetic counsellors or geneticists to help patients navigate this, because it really is more complex than just saying it's normal or it's abnormal.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a hard question because I know there's going to be some listeners in the situation where they do have a mosaic. Am I saying that correctly? Mosaic embryo.
Mosaic.
Yep. And they maybe only have one and they don't know if they want to transfer or not transfer. What would you recommend? Because I know you have a good understanding of this.
Yeah. So there is this whole society of people that are experts in the study of mosaic embryos.
Wow.
And they have developed a guideline around what is an appropriate mosaic embryo to transfer and what is an inappropriate embryo to transfer. And generally speaking, the inappropriate ones are the ones that are likely to stick and likely to continue through to a live birth but have a really poor health outcome. So they're the ones you don't want to transfer. Whereas there are some mosaic embryos where the abnormal cell line is very small, so it might only be a very small percentage, less than 20% of the cells, or it's a kind of a benign chromosome that doesn't have too much impact. And the likelihood is that embryo's either going to take and make a completely normal baby, or it's just not going to take it all and, you're not going to get a pregnancy out of it.
Wow.
And so counsellors are well-versed on these guidelines. And so it's really important that anyone with a mosaic embryo has the opportunity to be counselled by someone skilled in this space who can give them the clear guidelines. Is this appropriate? Or is this not? And if it is appropriate, what is the likely outcome for that embryo?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So they will get a little more information about their embryo.
Informed choice.
Yeah. And then, like
good.
you said, it can, it's your choice to eliminate that risk. So I think it goes back to the whole point of the genetics and having the counselling to at least break it down and explain it. That's really good because that would be a hard spot to receive.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next question, what's the biggest misconception you hear about genetic testing in fertility and how do you address it? I feel like you've covered a lot of this, but yeah.
Yeah. The overwhelmingly biggest misconception I hear about PGT, preimplantation genetic testing for aneuploidy, right? So this is ruling in embryos with a normal chromosome, ruling out embryos with an abnormal chromosome, is that we are throwing out normal embryos. And certainly in the early days of preimplantation genetic testing on the old platforms, they were probably calling a lot of normal embryos abnormal and therefore discarding them. That was probably the early days. With the evolution of the treatment platforms, and particularly, I've got to call out Dr. Tristan Hardy, who is our geneticist that we have on staff at Monash. This man is insanely smart. One of the most highly intelligent individuals. If you can ever have an opportunity to have him on, I just think he is brilliant.
We'll be hitting him up.
But yeah, hit him up, definitely. He has developed a platform where the false negative rates are less than 1% and the false positive rates are less than 1%.
Wow.
And I think with modern techniques now in preimplantation genetic testing and the platforms that have been developed, there is less and less and less of an opportunity that we are ever going to throw out normal embryos that are labelled as abnormal. In saying that, if we have an embryo that is classified as normal and it is transferred and it continues, we would still always recommend NIPT, non-invasive prenatal testing, Harmony test often called. We would always recommend it because no test in any area of medicine is 100% guarantee.
Yeah.
So, and when we do preimplantation genetic testing, we're taking the cells from the trophectoderm. They are the cells that make the placenta. We do not take cells from the inner cell mass. And there is this possibility that there is mosaicism in an embryo and that the inner cell mass is different to the trophectoderm. So we always recommend that the NIPT is performed in that very small case that we've said an embryo is normal and it's actually abnormal.
Yeah. It's kind of like when you do the gender as well. Sometimes that's wrong. They say you're having a female and then
yeah, we say 99%, but is it 100%?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Nothing's 100%. Yeah.
Nothing. So how should patients approach decision-making after receiving their genetic testing results?
I think they should say to each other, what does this mean? And if they don't understand, keep asking, but what does this mean? But what does this mean? And if they're not getting clarity from their fertility specialist to the point where they understand it, then they need to say, can I speak to someone else? Can I speak to your genetic counsellor? Can I speak to your geneticist? Can I speak to your Dr. Hardy? Because it's really important that patients understand what does it mean for their fertility, what does it mean for their family planning and their family size, what does it mean for further treatment. One of the reasons that I think genetic testing for aneuploidy, so PGT-A, is really valuable for older patients, so advanced reproductive age patients, is I want to be able to show patients when they need to stop treatment. Because I think that so many times people keep going with embryo transfer after embryo transfer. I've just got that one embryo, I should just transfer it. No, I think you should test it. Because if I can tell you that embryo is abnormal, number one, you're going to save yourself on a transfer. But number two, that's important information for you to know when to stop treatment and move on.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than seeing a patient who's done 12 IVF transfers and 12 IVF cycles and 12 transfers and they've never done genetic testing to say, hey, it's time to stop and move on. That's where I see the real value in genetic testing in advanced reproductive age.
What if someone's under 35 and they've had, say, 3 failed embryo transfers? Would you recommend it then as well?
100%.
Would you recommend it from the very beginning, like from the very start?
Well, in my state, we can't. So under the age of 35.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So, and look, I think I understand that the government were going, yeah, we need to put some boundaries around this because back in the day, we didn't know if this was harmful or not. Now we know it's not. But Yeah, we have a limitation currently. It's all changing, but we have a limitation in WA that if a woman is under the age of 35, you can't access PGTA unless they have had recurrent implantation failure or they have a history of recurrent miscarriage or like they're a translocation carrier.
Wow.
So, so it does put boundaries on it. But to a woman who's producing a lot of embryos because she's young and she will, in testing them and knowing that 50% of those embryos are actually chromosomally abnormal, it saves her in traumatic transfers. And, even a woman of 33, 30 to 50% of her eggs are chromosomally abnormal.
That's a high number.
It's huge.
It is. But this is reproduction. And I think,
and we're
this
not
is the
fertile
big misconception.
species at
No,
all.
we're not. We are infertile when we want to be fertile, and we are so wasteful. Like we waste dozens of eggs every month. And sometimes the egg that you ovulate off is not the one that's normal. So to be able to give Yeah, I know. But to be able to give couples, women, this information is very empowering and it helps with family planning.
Yes.
I love that. And I love that you said that because I feel like, and we did the carrier screening at the beginning, but even getting that information was so overwhelming for weeks and we stopped everything. Like my husband thought he was dying when we first got the information and we actually had to then do the counselling, and even at that point we still didn't understand. And so I think the idea of what you were saying about making sure until you understand 100% what it is, keep asking and seek the geneticist, I can't even speak, or whoever it is that's going to be able to get the information that makes sense to you across. And for us, it was him seeing the endocrinologist who then put us at ease, and then we started our journey. But I think it would be even worse when you're testing the embryos to then get information and then not understanding it too. So,
and I think there's this thing being a patient where you really just want to rush everything.
Yes.
You just want to do the transfer straight away. You have so much urgency on your journey. But I love that also that you said, keep asking until you understand.
Yeah.
So the next question, how do you respond when patients want to test everything under the sun? And is more always better?
Oh, gosh. I remember one of my patients in the very early days came in with what seemed to be very clear PCOS. Anyway, we ended up, because there were sperm abnormalities and then there were embryo issues. And I remember she got pregnant reasonably quickly, but she said to me, why didn't you just test all of this stuff in the get-go? And I remember second guessing myself and going, why didn't I do that? And I think the thing is testing is never ending. Whenever you keep testing, you will find something. You'll find something. The question is, how much is that impactful on the infertility of this couple? Who knows? And the problem is, if I did all the testing in the world and found something, I could actually be taking you completely off track. And that was never the real reason why you were not conceiving in the first place. Am I delaying things? Is this an unnecessary delay? Sometimes you can't treat those things. Sometimes the treatment is thousands of dollars and you never really needed to do that in the first place. So I think it's really important for us to be judicious. I think a really nice analogy is test the big rocks first, then test the little rocks, then test the sand. Because I think that you want to know the big things first, and if the big things are a problem, go ahead and treat those things because you can. There's proven treatment before you go down the rabbit hole of testing the unproven stuff that then is costly and can potentially take you off track. And I'm alluding to all of that sort of immunological stuff that you hear about that is hugely expensive. And the treatments are unproven and we have no proof of harm and all of that. But let's not go there.
And costly.
That's a chat for another day.
Yeah.
I think you're right though. A lot of patients do say, I want to get everything tested. Why didn't I just get everything tested? So for patients listening, what would you say are the big rocks that should get tested from the very get-go? Say the infertile, unexplained, no answers, been trying for over 12 months.
Well, the unexplained would then suggest to me that they're normally ovulatory, so you would have tested that. That they've had a tubal patency test, they've already tested that. That his sperm is normal, you would have also tested that. So that to me is the rocks. Are you ovulatory? Are your tubes open? Is the sperm normal? From there, I would be looking at the house. So what's the anatomy of the uterus like? Endo, we know that 40% of women who are infertile have endometriosis. So have you had a good quality pelvic ultrasound? Have you looked at things like adenomyosis? Looking at the bloke, is he healthy? Arguably, would you do a sperm DNA fragmentation test? I kind of do, because it's something that I can do in the initial test. But it's a great way, because often in a infertility chat with a couple, it's one of the only times you can capture the bloke. And so to be able to have a sperm DNA test where I go, like, mate, this is not great. Talk to me about your alcohol, your smoking, your weight, your diet, what you drink when you go up on the mines. That sort of chat is really important. The lifestyle stuff, looking at the endocrine screen. These are fairly, on Medicare, fairly quick and easy tests to be doing. The karyotype. Again, I would presume that this is all part of the unexplained testing that gets done. And then you start to go down the rabbit hole. Do we do the laparoscopy? Do we do the hysteroscopy looking for chronic endometritis? Do we, while we're there, look at the uterine natural killer cells? But probably before I go down that pathway, I'd be doing the test and measure. Could we consider doing IUI? Is the couple young enough? Does she have a good enough ovarian reserve that doing some cycles of IUI is possible? Do they want 4 kids and she's already 37? Do we just crack on and do IVF and do genetic testing to make sure we're putting back chromosomally normal embryos, and then she's got enough for her family in the fridge at 37 instead of coming back at 40 and trying to get 40-year-old embryos? So this is all part of the thought and decision-making process. And it's a shared decision-making. It's a conversation that you have with your patients. What do you want for your family?
And there's a lot to think about.
How many patients?
It's so individualized.
What do you want? How many kids do you want? Because I'm never thinking about the first kid. I'm thinking about baby number 2 or baby number 3, because they always come back.
Yeah, and we don't think about that at the start. We're thinking of baby number 1.
Of course you are.
We just want a baby. So
we're thinking we're not going to get a baby. Yeah.
So that's the thought process that I go through.
Okay. No, that's
so
good.
there's
Thank
stepping
you.
stones too. Like it's not just
patients are going to be taking notes on this episode, so it's good. It's good.
So you see a lot of patients. What's one thing they are shocked about when they're doing their genetic testing?
Women and men but women particularly, are always shocked to find out what percentage of eggs is chromosomally abnormal. So when I have a couple of advanced reproductive age, let's say that's over 38, advanced reproductive age. I mean, the actual formal definition of that varies, but let's say we're seeing a 39-year-old couple and they're coming in, they've been trying to conceive for 6 months, and they're like, what can we do? And I'm like, the only thing we're going to look at, guys, is IVF. And they're like, but why? Can't I just do some IUI? And I'm like, at 70 to 80% of your eggs at 39, 40 are chromosomally abnormal. And your body is not always going to choose to ovulate the one that's normal. It's just a random pick. And so, if you went to the casino and the odds were 80% chance that you're going to get you're not going to put money on that. So we're just going to go to IVF and create embryos and test the normal ones and put them back, and bang, you'll be pregnant. So I think the thing that constantly shocks couples is how many eggs are chromosomally abnormal, and therefore what their chances of a pregnancy actually are, both spontaneously and with IVF, due to that chromosome abnormality.
Can I ask you a question? There's a celebrity, I'm not going to say which one. She's fallen pregnant. She's 47 with twins. What's the chance of that being natural?
Yeah, 1 in 200.
Wow, 1 in 200.
Yeah, it's so unlikely.
Yeah.
It's so unlikely. I'll tell you a story. I know of a woman, it may or may not be someone that I've treated against better judgment, who did several cycles of IVF over the age of 45. And we did genetic testing, and out of 20 embryos created over a couple of cycles of IVF, all 20 of them were abnormal.
Wow.
Like, it's just not right to do IVF on women over the age of 45 because all of their embryos are going to be abnormal. Like, it's a miracle. It is truly a miracle for a woman over the age of 45 to A, fall spontaneously pregnant, B, that pregnancy be normal, C, that the pregnancy is not complicated by preeclampsia or diabetes or early preterm birth. So let's not portray that as normal.
Yeah.
We are giving women the wrong information by saying, oh, see, I'm 47, you can do it too. Unlikely that they're going to do it.
Yeah. Look, I don't mind that they're not coming out and saying it's IVF, and it may not be IVF, but I just feel like
Donor, you mean?
Well, if it's IVF, yes. Yeah. If it's IVF, it's so not their eggs.
Yeah.
Or if it is their eggs, it's their eggs that they froze when they were much younger.
Because I was 43 and I knew that was like amazing.
Yeah.
Like
uncommon.
Yeah. 13%.
And 45 I knew was like not going to happen. So, it's definitely, I always think of it as a huge miracle. But if they're over 45.
Yeah. And why? Why would you do autologous IVF? That's IVF using your own eggs when you know it's not going to be successful, when you can get a donor and be successful. What is it about your beliefs that it has to be your biological egg? And that's the counselling piece. That's the challenge, is to question yourself why, and then sit down with someone wise, like a ANZICA accredited counsellor, to talk through what your preconceived ideas are and challenge them.
Yeah.
I guess there's not many examples out there of celebrities being open and saying it is donor. Yeah. So it's hard.
Yeah.
There's not many examples.
And they've got their privacy and I respect that.
But I would love to break the stigma.
It's definitely.
What is it about society that we can't let them be open? Yeah.
Yeah. And people do cling on to that. I was in a over 40s IVF page, and so I would see heaps of people jumping on. I'm 47. Do you think IVF will work for me? And like just desperate. And you just sort of watch all the comments come in and if you do donor, if you no, with my own eggs, and it's just shattering to see.
I guess it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes time to process
It's just
that.
being curious. Yeah. It's being curious about your ideologies around those things, I think. And as a fertility specialist, it's also really important to be curious. I always stand by seek first to understand before being understood. I need to understand why my patient feels that way before I can help them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Back to genetic testing. Can you share some real-life examples or case studies where genetic testing in IVF has successfully prevented hereditary diseases, and what impact did this have for the families involved?
Yeah. I am so grateful for the Mackenzie's Mission study that was done. Yeah. I'm so grateful to Mackenzie's family for standing up and saying, but why? Because, that's the biggest legacy piece that they have left in Mackenzie's memory, that we now routinely talk to patients about the opportunity to genetically test their embryos and all their pregnancies to see if that baby has a life-shortening condition. So I have numerous examples now where I've had patients who have done expanded carrier screening, or they were part of Mackenzie's Mission, the study, and have found, wow, we're both carriers of a condition. I've patients who just found they were both CF carriers, and they were young, they were in their 20s, they don't have infertility, and yet they've been thrust into this world of fertility treatment, but for the purpose of testing embryos. I had a joyous situation rather recently where all 5 embryos have come back unaffected, which means that's their entire family.
Good.
They can now comfortably transfer an embryo and know that child is never going to have cystic fibrosis.
Yeah.
Not only that, they're not carriers. And so they're never going to have to face that issue themselves because they'll know that they don't even carry the CF gene, the children born. So, that's just one example of several. Equally, I've had really sad stories of people where no matter how many embryos we've tested, we just can't find a normal one.
That's devastating.
And that is equally devastating is that, after numerous cycles and having to break the news, I'm really sorry, we tested 8 embryos, they're all affected. Or if they're not affected, they're abnormal. They've got abnormal chromosomes because we can test for that at the same time. But it does help people to get to that point where they go, do we look at a donor?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true.
So, out of sadness can come hope.
We hear so many beautiful donor stories.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're so grateful after going past that. But it's a process. Yeah.
This might be a really dumb question, but have we always had genetic conditions? Or centuries ago have we evolved so much that there was less back then? And sorry, it's probably a whole episode.
We have always. No. Yeah, it is a whole episode. The simple answer is we have always had genetic conditions. People are living longer and more, well, that's not true. Not more people are reproducing, but medicine is finding and identifying more and more conditions through, syndromic children and then being able to test for genes and look at that. There's this abnormal gene. Oh, by the way, the father has it as well. And so that ability to test through families. So there's always been genetic conditions. I think that we are understanding more and more that it's not just ethnically derived, whereas conditions sometimes were confined to ethnicities. So we look at sort of Jewish populations, for example, and Ashkenazi Jews and the Ashkenazi Jewish screen that is often done before couples come together. We're now a global population. And so we're not just Caucasian or we're not just Asian. We're all a bit of a mixing pot due to the fact that cultures and ethnicities have come together. And so because of that, there's more shared genetic heredity. And so the possibility that people carry conditions that they don't manifest themselves, but they might meet randomly another person who also carries that condition. And so the potential then to have children born with these conditions is there as well. So there's sporadic mutations that happen, but then there is the ethnic and pan-ethnic, and then there's now sort of global recognition of genetic diseases.
Okay. Maybe in our future we'll see people with Tinder profiles and dating profiles with all their 100%. Genetic conditions, and so sorry, you and I together not happening.
Or you just updated on the profile and it doesn't let you match with those people.
No, these two we're not a match.
Yeah, you girls are probably not old enough, but there was that movie Gattaca.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, you're so not old enough. I just looked at both of you. You just went, what?
I'm probably old enough.
Gattaca. Go and look it up. Do you remember VHS? Yeah, they had it at the video store. Gattaca. It was all
I remember VHS.
It was all about making the perfect human, and I mean, we're living it.
We have to watch
that. We'll link it below, guys. We'll link it below.
Yeah. Okay, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
All right, so our final question. Even if there's no known history of genetic conditions in a family, can patients still undergo genetic testing during IVF, and what benefits does it offer?
Yeah. Carrier screening, when we're talking about carriage of genetic mutations, no. Because you've got to know what you're looking for, right? So when you are looking for the carriage of a monogenic disease, a mutation, you've got to have the blueprint of the mum and the dad and a reference disease. So genetic mutations, no. Can you undergo genetic testing of embryos to look for abnormal chromosome numbers? Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think we've talked ad nauseum. But if you're specifically asking, can you just do a screen of the embryo to look for diseases? No. There is this concept of polygenic testing of embryos to look for, and we're not there yet in Australia, but it's on the horizon, where you can do a profile and look for what's your risk of heart disease, breast cancer, high cholesterol, being obese, tallness, shortness.
What?
Gattaca.
What?
There's definitely this polygenic testing stuff.
Wow.
We're just not sure where this sits with regards to wrongful birth and rightful birth, and the logistics and the legalities of these things. So watch this space, polygenic testing. It's certainly a thing in some of our Northern Hemisphere relations, but we're not there yet in our society, but it's coming.
Are you excited for it or scared for it?
I'm a bit scared for it because do you value breast cancer over heart disease or vice versa?
Yeah.
Yeah, and where do you draw the line?
Tallness and shortness, yeah.
Are we going to outlaw shortness, short people?
I know.
Sorry, I'm out.
Oh my goodness.
Is that a disability, being short?
Yeah, that's crazy.
I like being short.
Yeah.
Me too. We're both shorties over here.
Good things come in small packages.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tamara, for joining us today. It's been so great. I think you've actually inspired me to do the testing because I've never got it done. I've always been scared to find out what if there's more things, I don't want to be diagnosed with something else, but it's not that. I feel like you've made me feel less scared about it all.
Yeah, it's empowering to know
knowledge is
more.
power.
And you got it done.
And it's giving you informed choice. And I think that's what you want, is to be informed and then make the decision that you're most comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Your feelings are valid to be scared, but I think
100%.
to give you that choice is so true too.
100%.
So where can the listeners best find you, Tamara, if they want to reach out? I mean, everybody sees you on social media.
Guys, definitely follow.
Yeah, look, I do love to hang out on Instagram occasionally. Wednesday nights, I like to get on and answer
live.
some simple questions. I don't like people's life stories, but I do like to answer the general questions. I also have a website, Dr Tamara Hunter. You can join me on. You'll also find me at Monash IVF in Western Australia.
Oh, amazing!
Love
Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, we'll put everything down below in the show notes. But thank you so much for joining us today. I think that's a wrap on this week's episode.
See you soon. Bye.